as a leader, I think is something that is probably one of the biggest mistakes people make is I got communication coaching. We all have a communication style that has worked for us to get us to a certain level of success. But when you step into a leadership role, the things that helped you be successful as a solo person, which is how most of us start, are things that prevent you from being a really good leader once you start surrounding yourself with people.
You're asking yourself, why am I doing this?
Smart people would know how to use all these different tools. They start with something small.
You'll never get your entire organization if you don't pull off operations. Don't give up.
It can be as small as that.
I think you guys are going to have a last today.
What is going on, everybody? Welcome to the Delegate That podcast, where we discuss the art and science of delegation, business management, and leadership. I am, as always, your host, Adam Labar, and today I'm stoked to talk to a good friend, Aaron West. Aaron, if you can, please go ahead and introduce yourself and tell us about your business.
My name is Aaron West. I am in Modesto, California, which is not what most people think of. There's no beaches, and we are not close to the ocean at all. We're about an hour and a half east of San Francisco, so in the Central Valley of California. I have a real estate business. I started a team in 2015, so just coming up on 11 years now of having a team. We're one of the top teams in all of California, mid-sized teams in California, and we love what we do, and we're good at it.
Fantastic. So in 11 years, how long did it take for you to become one of the top teams in California?
We've always been a top team for the size that we are. So on we started out as a small team and built ourselves up from there. I had built a really successful solo business on my own. And so when I decided to start bringing on and building a business that had employees, sales employees, it was really just a building of that because I had built a solid solo career.
So we hear a lot in the real estate world how difficult it is to kind of work with other real estate agents. Some real estate agents have no idea what they're doing. Some of them, obviously, if you built yourself a good book of business and you were doing well, then decided to start finding a team, how did you kind of narrow in what type of people to hire? How did you kind of go, okay, I need to hire 7 me's, but me's that can listen to me, because that's also something that's difficult, right? So how did you kind of start building your team and know who you wanted to hire?
For me, and that's a great question, and it's something that I've been asked a number of times, I actually don't want me. There's only one me.
Yeah.
And so I wanted to build a team that had as much diversity to it as possible so that every client could be served, because I'm not the right fit for some people. And just like, Chris isn't the right fit for some people on my team, I wanted to be able to build a team where they were all forced to adapt, because anytime you're in sales, the key to success is being able to adapt to all of the personality types and styles. And so as the team got built out, I became intentional about making sure that I had all of the different kinds of people and personality styles and communication styles, so that the team was forced to understand how to deal with those people. And then that would trickle through to, as they went out and did business themselves.
Do you feel overwhelmed with mundane tasks that eat up your valuable time? It's time to reclaim your schedule and focus on what truly matters. Get your time back with elite remote talent without the time zone hassle. Delegate $10 an hour tasks to focus on your $1,000 an hour tasks. Schedule your free strategy call at wisevas.io.
Okay, so in a lot of my military experience and training, we did a lot of DISC stuff in some of my previous organizations, and they try to look at it from a managed perspective. This is how you manage those types of people. It's how you do these types of things. Were there any tools or things that you used as you were hiring? I mean, you talked about having this wide, diverse group of folks and all these different personalities, but now you have to manage all of those different personalities and make sure that they fit well together as they're working or whatever. How did you kind of manage that team to make sure that everything flowed well together and they were doing the work?
One of my gifts is really understanding personality types, and the DISC is one of them, the Enneagram. I mean, there's 8 or 10 different ones that are out there. And in my previous career in the jewelry industry, that was really ingrained into us to really understand who we're talking to and who we're dealing with. And so when I'm bringing somebody on, we interview at least 5 times before we bring somebody onto the team. There's 2 or 3 interviews with me. There's an interview with my integrator. The team has an interview with the person where they meet the person and I get feedback from them just to see if they see any red flags that I miss. And that really, and I think that's one of the biggest mistakes that people make when they're hiring or when they're building out a business, is they don't take the time at the front end to understand who they're marrying, because that's really what you're doing is you're creating a relationship with whoever the person is that's coming on your team. If you're building a business where you want long-term employees and long-term people. And so from the very beginning, it was really important that I understood who I was going to be dealing with. And one of my mentors said once, he said, my job, and he was talking about being the owner of the business, my job is to understand what the world is that the people that are working for me want to build, and to build my world so big that they can have their world inside of my world. So when we're going through the interview process, one of the interviews is an hour-long interview of what does 5 years from now look like for you? If we could wave a magic wand and everything that you hoped for within the West experience, that's the name of my business, came true, what would that look like for you? And usually it's, some people are conservative, some people, shoot for the moon. And then the conversation that we have as we wrap everything up is, okay, now that I understand that, I want you to know that every single thing that you want to achieve is achievable, because most people vastly underestimate what they can do in 5 years and overestimate what they can do in a year. My question to you is are you willing to work that hard? Are you willing to grow as a person to become the person that those things happens to? And so spending that time, I think, at the front end to really understand what's important to them, what their goals are, sets a really good foundation for building long-term employees and people who can be and will be happy as they continue to grow, and they don't outgrow you.
I love it. The one thing I know about you, just having known you for the last 5 or 6 years, is that you are very focused on the growth, on where you want to go, like what 5 years looks like, how to goal set, how to set all that up. And I could just picture you pouring that into all of your team members as well. Is there a pulse on what that looks like for how often you bring your team members in? Where are you guys out on your goals? Not necessarily in the West experience specifically, but in their own desires, like so that you're pouring into individual team members. Do you guys have a pulse behind that, or what does that look like at your business?
100%. We're both in GoBundance, and so in GoBundance there's a sheet called a one sheet where you have 6 different areas of your life, and there's the top 3 goals for the year in each one of those areas. And in November, we as a team go up to the mountains and do our we have a cabin, and we rent another cabin so that it covers everybody. And we sit down, and for 2 days, we go through each bucket of our life. We write down 10 goals in each one of those areas. Then they decide the 3 that are most important to them. And they share all 10 of their goals with everybody. So everybody on the team knows about everybody else's goals. And then when we're done with that, they have a couple of weeks to gather it all together and put together what are the 3 most important goals for them in each area of their life. So we meet at least quarterly with each agent or each person on the team to go over what those goals are for them, where they are in that process, and how can we help them achieve those goals. We also, as a team, we have a weekly team meeting that's in person every Monday morning. And this was our first one back after, the new year. And every single person said what was the one thing that they were most proud of, regardless of business, for the year. And that was what was the one thing that they were going to focus on this year. Could be business or personal. And it was a mix of both, actually. And then we had a conversation of how do we, as peers and a team or a business, how do we hold those people capable to the standards and goals that they've set for themselves throughout the year? So it's a conversation that we have on a regular basis. We typically have I'll have a meeting with each member of the team, staff, and on the team individually at least once a month. And it usually averages out to about every 3 weeks. We'll have a one-on-one 45-minute to an hour sit down where we're talking about where they are in their business, where they are in their lives, what can I do to help them be successful, and how can we hold them capable or accountable to the things that they're committing to.
I can't tell you how much I appreciate that. And as I'm hearing that, I'm listening and I'm thinking to myself, I mean, I told you right before we started recording, just bought a business, got 3 young employees, and I would love to bring like a one sheet to them, something that I never saw until I was in my mid 30s. Right. And now it's like, if I can bring something to these kids to say, hey, this is how you can set goals, this is where you can go, and the growth trajectory they could take. They're not going to be long-term employees of mine because nobody wants to sit at an escape room for a long time, but the life change you can make for them is astronomical. So what sort of growth have you seen in your employees as you've done this, as you've poured into these folks? Like, what sort of rewards are you getting as the leader and the growth that you're seeing in these employees?
You know, it's interesting you say that, because I had like an emotion come up out of me as you were talking about it, because I have on the team, we have one that started when he was 19. He just turned 21 a little while ago, and he started at the beginning of the year. So he just had his anniversary, and I sent him a message about how much growth I had seen in him as a 20-year-old young man, how different he was at the end of the year than he was at the beginning of the year. And then I have another agent who, she's older, high D, used to be a police officer. So, I mean, you're familiar with the military. It's make a snap decision really quickly on the limited amount of information you have, and you're right. And so seeing the growth in her of what we're working on this year for her is she's never allowed to be the first person to answer a question when the team answers a question, and B, she can only answer a question after she's asked a question. And she's embraced it, which has been really hard for her, but it's teaching her to come from curiosity instead of coming from a place of instant snap decision. And so to see these agents and these people and truly every single person on the team, it's amazing that the growth that they've all had, because it is an environment that is fostered and nurtured and watered. It's amazing to see how different they all are since they all started.
Very awesome. I want to go to the former police officer and follow up on something. How do you sit down and kind of create that type of idea? Like, hey, you're not allowed to ask a question or answer a question until you've asked one, and those types of things. How do you sit down and kind of come up with ideas like that? Because like that is as you're saying that, like you said, I'm a prior military guy and law enforcement. That's just. I hear a little bit, make this go. Like, it doesn't matter, break the wall down. And I don't take that time to sit back most of the time. But that would be helpful for me. So how do you come up with those types of ideas, or what discussions do you have with your team to kind of come up with those ideas to help foster those relationships?
For this person specifically, and for those that are type A's, as soon as a conversation is over, it's just done. So there's no emotional attachment to, the anger that you feel or the conflict that you feel. As soon as the conflict is over, it's done. So at least with this agent, when we do have conflict, as soon as a little bit of time has passed, then we can come back and revisit it, because that conflict is over. Now it's a learning time. And understanding about her and understanding that about that personality type allows us to have conflict. We just had conflict yesterday afternoon where it got pretty heated. And then an hour later, I invited her into the office, and then we discussed that conflict, and we talked about where I was coming from, how I understood where she was coming from, and what are the things that she could do to be more aware of preventing that conflict. Because not everybody is like me, that, on the disc, I'm a 98 I and a 97 D. So I can do both sides pretty easily, and not everybody has the ability to have that conflict and just forget about it. And so it's creating the calm spaces where you can have a conversation about what the challenge is. And the same conversation gets had. I have someone who is a super emotional human being, and I had to learn, and still am always working on, how do I sit down and have a conversation with him to tell him he needs to be more direct, because he has the exact opposite problem that the other agent does. And all of those things challenge me as a leader to slow down, ask better questions, not jump to a conclusion, because I'm a very rapid person as well. So there's been this huge growth journey for me of forcing me to be more prepared so that I can show up better for those that are surrounding me.
I would imagine that's a constant battle. So anybody listening, I'm sure if they can just sit back for a second and realize that this is a never-ending process in the leadership world of, okay, I'm seeing some conflict here, I'm seeing some things there, because none of us like to fire folks. Well, I guess some people probably do, but nobody really likes to fire folks because then you got to hire somebody. And hiring and firing are the most difficult things. And just like in real estate, when you have changeover of your tenants, it's the most expensive thing. Same thing in your business. When you have changeover of your employees, it's the most expensive and pain in the butt thing you can do. So let's work on figuring out how to make this happen. So I love that you're pouring into your people. You're trying to think of ways to do that and look at it differently and setting goals that are encouraging your team members. So speaking of the setting goals side of the house, we're at 2026 now, right? At the time of this recording, it's the 7th. I don't know when this will be released, maybe sometime in February, but how do you kind of structure your goals for your business, sitting down to say, hey, this is where I want 2026 to be. This is how I want to lay this all out. Talk to me about your goal setting process.
Okay, awesome. But before I do that, and I'll circle back around to that, I just had another thought for the people that are listening that as a leader, I think is something that is probably one of the biggest mistakes people make is I got communication coaching. We all have a communication style that has worked for us to get us to a certain level of success. But when you step into a leadership role, the things that helped you be successful as a solo person, which is how most of us start, are things that prevent you from being a really good leader once you start surrounding yourself with people. And the communication coaching that I received changed my life. And I would encourage anybody who is in a leadership position or that owns a business to do the work on themselves to figure out what their communication style is, how their employees view them. I had my coach actually sent out a survey to the team, and the number one word that came back was blunt, because if I hear a problem, I just speak it out. And for me to hear that made me realize that there was a lot of growth left for me in that. And so and I'll get to goals now, but that was something that I think has been so powerful for me to be able to become a better leader, is really learning how to adapt my communication style to for them to be more receptive to it.
I greatly appreciate that addition, because it's one of those things that, we just talked about all the things that you're doing to pour into your team. But it takes a lot of growth on your side to be able to do that. So well done on bringing that up and being able to push that.
All right, let's talk about goals, because this is one of my areas of mastery and
love it.
One of the places that I love to talk about. So when I'm setting goals, and one of the mistakes that most people make is that they set results or intentions as goals. And what I mean by that is running a marathon is a goal. It falls under all of the SMART: specific, measurable, actionable, realistic, and with time bound. If I'm going to run a marathon in 2026, that's a goal. The reality is, though, is that that's the result you're trying to achieve from the goals that you have to fulfill to get to that point. And those goals would be running 3 days a week, eating, stretching 3 days a week, eating well, sleeping 8 hours and recovering, doing yoga. And so when I set goals, I have the result that I'm trying to achieve, but then I break down what are the actionable, trackable goals that I can write down so that by doing those things, the result becomes an inevitability. So, for example, you and I both, our relationships are important to us. Most people would write a goal that says, I want to be a better husband. But if you break that down, what does that mean? What are the things that you can do to be a better husband? So my goals for being a better husband are 52 date nights with my wife, 2 books that we read together, 1 marriage retreat that we do a year. I think we have 6 overnight weekend trips with nobody else around. So that if I do all of those things, the result is going to be, I'm going to be a better husband. My phone gets put away at 7 p.m. 3 nights a week so that I can be more present for my wife. This year, one of my goals is to twice a month, so 24 times a year, cook dinner with my wife, because that's not something that I normally do. So that creates quality time, which is her love language. So when I'm doing goals for the team or when I'm doing goals for myself, I know what the result is, but I know that that's not the goal. And so I break it down into what are the things that you can attach a number to that you can actually say, okay, I didn't get to 10% body fat. Why is that? Well, that's because I only tracked my macros 100 times this year, and there's 365 days in the year. So then I can go back and say, okay, well then what is realistic for me to track if I only did it 100 times? Well, then my goal now this next year is going to be tracking 175 times. It's not 300 because that's not realistic. So I've become really intentional about understanding what kinds of goals are and then writing the goals that your brain understands and that you can read. So all of my goals are complete sentences. And they're all yearly goals. I think that's a mistake that a lot of people make too, is read the Bible daily is a great goal. It's just unrealistic. You're going to get sick. You are going to miss a day. So your brain doesn't even take that in and take it as something that's realistic because it knows it's not going to happen. So if you read the Bible 300 times, that's a complete sentence that your brain takes and puts to another place. It gives you some grace so that when you miss a day or you miss a week, your brain says, oh, okay, we can make it up. It's also 300 times, not 300 days. So if I miss 4 months and I'm like, okay, I can break this up and read in the morning and read in the evening, you can still achieve that goal, and your brain is going to help you make that happen, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it makes a lot of sense. So it sounds similar to how EOS kind of works out their goals, right? Where you have your annual targets of what you're going for, and then you set up your scorecards to make sure that everything's happening. So the scorecard is kind of like the goal in that sense. Is I'm achieving these things that are going to get me that outcome.
Correct.
When did you kind of start working your goal setting in this way?
It's interesting. The real epiphany for me about writing goals was that in 2007, I was a couple $100,000 in debt, had just started in my real estate career. And I went to a conference, and he had us write a 5-year vision. So 2007 to 2012. And then in 2012, I wrote another 5-year vision for 2017. And I got into GoBundance and was surrounded by, amazing people like David Osborne and people who understood goals at a really high level. And I started seeing the benefits and, from seeing who they were and what their growth was. And so I started deciding I was going to do it for my team. I think this was probably 18 or 19 when this hit. And I found those two visions in books. You go to a conference and you write everything and then you put it on a shelf. And I was within like 3% on every single number that I had written down. So from 2007, the number of transactions, how much I made, what my business looked like, that we had bought a cabin, all of those things for 2012 were within just a couple of percent. And then in 2012, when I wrote that one for 2017, I wrote going to Germany and doing a bucket list Ironman and having 2 agents on the team who are still with me and finding an operations manager who would become the COO of my company. And all of those things came true. And I remember thinking, holy crap, why didn't I think bigger? And it started to unlock for me what the power of your mind is and how powerful your mind is looking for opportunities for you, the non-conscious mind. And that's really when I started doing some really deep diving and research and becoming really intentional about writing goals. And one of the things you said about EOS is for business, it's very easy for a lot of people to write those kinds of goals, those trackable, actionable steps that you can do to become successful. But very, very few people actually take that and move it over to the rest of their life, to their health, to their relationships, to their, all of those other areas of your life. And what I've found is that when you show that intentionality in all of the areas of your life, everything gets better. And you enjoy life more, you become more intentional, which in turn translates to your business because there's less stress in those other areas. So you're able to put more bandwidth into your business, and you're able to lead what I call, whole life success instead of just the stress of, your wife and your money and, all the things that people separate from their business, if you put some amount of focus in those other areas, invariably your business sees the benefit of that as well.
That's I can't disagree with that at all. That's speaking of the family side of the house, right, or the personal side of the house, I look at it from the family side, right? One of your goals this year was your spouse, and I strongly encourage. I tell people all the time, besides following Jesus, the next best thing you could do is marry the right person, right? And a lot of entrepreneurs, a lot of people running businesses that are hard charging, they're setting all these business goals that you talked about. They tend to kind of struggle on that family side. How do you make sure that how would you advise folks make sure that they are keeping that spark with their spouse, that they're growing their business and their family at the same time, and they're not losing one for the other?
Well, you use the right word, and the magic word is and. It's both and, it's not either or. And when you're at a 4 in your relationship, and I would encourage everybody on a scale of 1 to 10, go relationship, family, kids, happiness, gratitude, all of these areas, take a couple of minutes, write down all the areas that are important to you, and then put a 1 to 10 in each one of those areas. To go from a 3 to a 4 is a huge improvement, but it doesn't take a lot of time, effort, and energy. So if you're challenged with your relationship or you're challenged with your kid, if they're getting 0 of you, the real you, the present you, changing from 0 to 2 nights a week is a gargantuan difference that you will see and they will see a difference in your life. And so I think that it's just really important that you go to both and you say, okay, I can have a really successful business and take an hour in the evening and really focus on my family and life. I think for a lot of us, we go, and we don't ever stop and say, okay, am I going in the right place? We just, this illustration popped into my head, and the Iditarod, which is the race from Anchorage to Nome, Alaska, that goes, right now they completed in about 2 weeks. The first time they ran that race, it took, I think, 6 weeks for those dogs to get from Alaska, Anchorage to Nome, or whatever it was. It was a long time. And then and it was that way for years. And then one guy came along and he took 4 days or 5 days off of the fastest time that had ever been done. And they figured out that when the dogs just ran themselves into the ground and they never recovered, that added so much time to the length of the race. So the dogs actually rest more than they run now during that race, because they understand that rest and that slowing down actually makes you faster for the overall. And I think a lot of people, when it comes to business, they're go, and they don't ever take that step back and slow down for a minute to be able to focus on their family, focus on those other places. But then when you go back to your business, you're rested, recharged, and then you're going so much harder. I think most people just kind of go in this line that is just kind of this dead zone of not really resting, not really going hard, but they've just been going this speed for so long that they don't know that there is something faster that they could be doing.
What does that look like for your employees, for your team members, right? Because it's very easy for us to look at it in ourselves. Well, I shouldn't say very easy, but it's much easier for me to look at it myself and go, okay, I need to rest some more. But dagnabbit, my employees better still be there working their butt off and making it happen. But no, because like production, making this, making that, making this. So, how do you pour it into your employees to encourage them to do that as well? Like do that rest? In
our business in real estate, it's not a 24/7 business, but it can be if you let it. And one of the best pieces of advice when I first got into real estate was from a mentor. And he said, you have to take at least one day off. So I picked Sundays, and I never worked a Sunday in my entire real estate career. And so I've translated that into the team. I've got one young, just rock star. He is just running all the time, that I have to force him and say, what day off are you taking this week? Because I know that he has all the energy of a 26-year-old, but resting is going to make him better. And it's a conversation that we have of, when are you going to take a day off? When I see them starting to do that, go, because they can't go. You can't go all the time. You can't burn the candle at both ends without getting some burnout at some point. And burnout takes so much longer to recover from than taking the rest.
Absolutely. Well, Aaron, this has been a fantastic lesson in leadership and helping some folks gather. I know I've got like 3 pages of notes to take back and pour into my team and talk to my wife about. So, it's been absolutely awesome. If folks are hearing something you're saying, maybe there's some tools or something that you have. Actually, I should ask that. Do you have any tools that you would recommend for folks for goal setting, for leadership? Any books or anything that you'd recommend folks listen to?
I'm a big fan of the old school books from the 30s, How to Win Friends and Influence People, Think and Grow Rich, The Richest Man in Babylon. Those books are the books that all of today's self-help books are based off of. So I think that if people really want to go back to, one of my mentors said this: tactics change, principles don't. And so if you read principle-based books or you lead a principle-based life, all you're doing is changing the tactics. So I think for leadership and communication and all of these other areas where we try to excel, find the principles that you can apply to your life, and then you just adapt with the tactics just change.
Absolutely love it. That is wise advice. A couple of those books are I got to go back and listen to How to Win Friends and Influence People again, because it's been too long.
I read it like once every 18 months. I'll read that book. It's
rereading that is a requirement for any, like, if you haven't read it, anybody listening, definitely read it. If you have already read it, read it again, make it a 2026 goal to get that one knocked out. But Aaron, it's been awesome hanging out with you, chat with you a little bit, catching up. I love your leadership style. I love what you do with your team. I love watching how you kind of work in GoBundance and encourage folks and set goals. And you're doing a goal setting retreat, a little school or a class here right before the January event. So awesome. I know that this is just a passion of yours. So thank you very much. If folks are hearing you and maybe they want to reach out to you for one reason or another, what is the best way for folks to get a hold of you?
You can reach out to me on Instagram. It's the Aaron C. West, or you can just look up the West Experience Real Estate Group. Will be the first ones that pop up if you just type in the West Experience on Google. And then, of course, if anybody knows anybody in the Central Valley who's looking to buy or sell, we'd love the opportunity to serve them and make you look like a hero.
Absolutely. Well, Aaron, again, I greatly appreciate you spending some time with us. If you, anybody listening to this, if you found value in this, which I am positive you did, please share it with somebody that you think is going to learn something from it as well. Please like and subscribe. Let us know what your favorite part of this podcast was in the comments, and we will chat with everybody on the next show.